Hello, my dear friends. Tonight, you are not scrolling on a glowing screen. There are no messages waiting, no profiles to swipe, no carefully filtered photos. Instead, you find yourself standing in a quiet medieval town. A church bell rings steady and calm. And in this world, love does not begin with a swipe. It begins with rumor, reputation, and advice that sounds strange to modern ears. Because in medieval times, dating did not exist the way we know it. There were no casual coffee meetings, no late-night conversations over phones. Courtship was structured, observed, and often guided by written advice. Advice that was sometimes surprisingly poetic, sometimes deeply practical, and sometimes very strange. Medieval people cared deeply about love, not only for marriage but for honor, family alliances, and social stability. And because of this, advice manuals, poems, and religious writings offered guidance on how to attract a partner, how to behave in courtship, and how to avoid embarrassment. Some of that advice feels thoughtful even today. Other parts feel completely alien. In the 12th century, a French writer named Andreas Capellanus wrote a book called The Art of Courtly Love. It was meant to guide nobles through the complicated rituals of romantic attraction. But instead of encouraging simple honesty, it suggested that love should involve difficulty, longing, and even suffering. According to this advice, love grew stronger when obstacles stood in the way. A man should not immediately confess feelings. He should appear controlled, patient, and slightly distant. Too much eagerness suggested weakness. At the same time, women were advised to appear modest and reserved. Laughter should be gentle. Eye contact should not be too bold. Clothing should reflect dignity rather than excess. The idea was not to hide beauty, but to reveal it slowly. Attraction, according to medieval thinking, was something to be discovered in layers, not displayed all at once. Strangely, some advice warned against falling in love too easily. Writers claimed that true love required proof of character. A suitor might be tested through conversation, poetry, or small acts of devotion. Gifts were symbolic rather than expensive. A simple ribbon, a glove, or a small carved token carried deep meaning. Love was theatrical, almost like a quiet performance unfolding over weeks or months. In some regions, herbal advice even entered the conversation. Medieval medical texts sometimes recommended certain plants believed to inspire affection or calm nervousness before meeting a potential partner. Lavender, rosemary, and rose petals were associated with attraction. These were not magical potions in the modern fantasy sense, but they reflected a belief that scent and atmosphere influenced emotion. Yet not all advice was romantic. Some was practical to the point of bluntness. Marriage in medieval times often involved family negotiation, so advice included reminders to consider a partner's land, reputation, and financial stability. Love and survival were connected. A good match meant protection, resources, and shared responsibility. Interestingly, jealousy was discussed openly. Medieval writers warned that excessive jealousy destroyed harmony. A lover should show devotion, but avoid suspicion. Trust was considered a form of strength. This feels surprisingly modern, even if expressed in older language. There were also curious warnings about appearance. Some texts advised against wearing too much perfume. as strong scents were thought to signal vanity. Others cautioned against overeating at feasts if one hoped to impress a potential partner. Self-control was attractive. Moderation signaled discipline. Perhaps the most unusual advice of all was the idea that love improved moral character. Courtly love literature often claimed that a man who loved sincerely became braver, kinder, and more honorable. Love was seen as a refining force. In this way, romance was tied to personal growth rather than mere attraction. As night deepens in our medieval town, lanterns glow faintly behind wooden shutters. Somewhere inside one of these homes, a young noble practices polite phrases before speaking to someone admired. Somewhere else, a family quietly discusses whether a certain suitor seems trustworthy. The process is slow. It is cautious. It is layered with ritual and expectation. There are no instant replies here. No sudden declarations. Everything moves carefully, guided by custom and advice that blends poetry with practicality. And as the quiet settles over stone streets and distant bells fade into silence, we continue our gentle exploration into more unusual pieces of medieval dating guidance. Some charming, some strange, and some surprisingly wise. As morning slowly arrives in the medieval town, life begins early. Doors open to the cool air, market stalls are assembled, and people step into the streets long before the sun fully rises. Courtship, in this world, does not happen in private spaces. It happens in public view, woven quietly into daily routines. This alone changes everything about how people approached attraction. One of the most unusual pieces of advice from medieval writers was simple. If you wished to be noticed by someone you admired, you did not seek isolation. You practiced presence. A person hoping to attract a partner made sure they appeared regularly in respectable places. The church courtyard after services, the well where water was drawn, or the weekly market all became stages of careful observation. Not confrontation, not bold confession, but gentle familiarity. Writers suggested that repeated calm appearances created comfort. A person seen often became trusted. A stranger created uncertainty, but a familiar face allowed affection to grow slowly. In many ways, medieval advice valued patience more than charm. The idea was not to impress quickly, but to become known naturally. Conversation, when it finally happened, followed strict guidance. Medieval etiquette warned against speaking too much about oneself. Boasting was considered deeply unattractive. Instead, a suitor was encouraged to listen carefully, respond politely, and speak modestly. Humor was acceptable, but only gentle humor. Loud laughter or teasing risked embarrassment and damaged reputation. Words were chosen carefully because reputation mattered greatly in small communities. Eye contact itself carried meaning. Manuals suggested brief glances rather than constant staring. A quick look followed by respectful attention elsewhere signaled interest without disrespect. This subtle communication allowed attraction to exist without public shame. In a world where honor was essential, indirect signals protected both people. Gift-giving also followed surprising rules. Expensive presents were discouraged early in courtship. They created obligation rather than affection. Instead, small personal objects were preferred. A ribbon in a favored color, a hand-sewn token, or a carefully written poem. These gifts suggested thoughtfulness, not wealth. The value lay in effort, rather than cost. Poetry played an especially important role. A short verse memorized and recited softly could express admiration while maintaining dignity. The words did not need to be perfect. In fact, sincerity mattered more than skill. The act of composing was itself a sign of dedication. Medieval culture believed that effort demonstrated genuine feeling. Even walking together required caution. A man and woman rarely wandered alone together in early courtship. Instead, they spoke during group activities, festivals, gatherings, or shared work. This protected reputation and avoided gossip. Privacy, in the modern sense, came much later in relationships. Advice texts also warned strongly against rushing marriage proposals. A suitor was encouraged to seek approval from family members before making intentions public. Sudden declarations created tension between households. Respect for family was considered part of respect for the partner. Interestingly, writers understood nervousness. They recommended calming behavior before speaking, slow breathing, careful posture, and measured speech. While they did not use modern psychology, they recognized anxiety and offered methods to manage it. Confidence was not loudness, it was steadiness. As midday approaches, the town becomes busier. Merchants call out, animals move along narrow lanes, and ordinary work continues. Yet within this activity, small interactions carry importance. A greeting, a shared task, a polite exchange. Courtship unfolds quietly, almost invisibly to outsiders but clearly to those involved. Medieval dating advice may seem slow, even restrictive, yet it created something lasting. Attraction developed alongside trust. Instead of sudden passion, affection deepened gradually. The process itself tested character. Patience, kindness, and reliability became part of romance. And as the sun begins its gentle descent toward evening once more, we continue forward into even stranger beliefs, superstitions, customs, and rituals medieval people followed in hopes of encouraging love and preventing heartbreak. By late afternoon, the light softens across the town, and now we enter one of the strangest areas of medieval romance: belief. Courtship in the Middle Ages was not guided only by manners and poetry. It was also shaped by superstition, seasonal signs, and a quiet trust that nature itself could reveal whether two people belonged together. Medieval people believed love was connected to the wider order of the world. Just as crops followed seasons and tides followed the moon, human affection was thought to follow hidden patterns. Because of this, dating advice often included instructions that sound unusual today, yet felt perfectly logical at the time. For example, certain days were believed better for beginning a relationship. Friday was often considered favorable because it was associated with harmony and calm reflection. A meeting arranged on that day was thought to encourage gentleness between partners. Meanwhile, some communities avoided starting courtship during periods of fasting or religious solemnity, believing strong emotion should not interrupt spiritual focus. Love was welcome, but it was expected to respect sacred rhythms. Weather also carried meaning. A clear morning on the day two people first spoke was taken as a hopeful sign. Heavy wind was interpreted as emotional instability. Rain could be seen two ways, either cleansing and promising, or warning of difficulty, depending on local tradition. None of these ideas were scientific, yet they gave people comfort. They felt the world was gently guiding their choices. One particularly curious piece of advice involved shared objects. Some traditions suggested that two people interested in one another should drink from the same cup during a feast. This act symbolized unity and trust. It was not done openly in a dramatic way. Instead, the cup would be passed quietly, and observers might notice but pretend not to. The symbolism mattered more than public declaration. Another belief concerned clothing. Wearing a small piece of a certain color, often green associated with growth, was thought to encourage affection, not because it magically created love, but because colors carried emotional associations. Seeing the same color repeatedly reminded the observer of the person wearing it. Medieval people understood memory and association, even if they explained it through symbolism rather than psychology. Scent was taken seriously as well. Herbs like rosemary were placed near doors or woven into small pouches. The pleasant smell created a welcoming environment, but people also believed it strengthened bonds. In truth, calming scents probably reduced nervousness, allowing conversations to flow more easily. What they called charm, we might call atmosphere. There were even listening rituals. Some young people quietly stood near crossroads at certain evenings, believing they might overhear words that hinted at their future partner. Of course, what they heard depended entirely on chance, yet chance itself became meaningful. If a friendly conversation reached their ears, it was taken as encouragement. These practices did not force love. They offered reassurance during uncertainty. Dreams also held importance. Advice texts recommended paying attention to recurring dreams about a person. Repetition suggested sincerity of feeling. While modern thinking might explain this as emotional focus, medieval understanding saw dreams as messages guiding decisions gently, rather than directly. Families participated in these customs too. Older relatives observed behavior carefully. Politeness, patience, generosity. If a suitor treated servants kindly and spoke respectfully, it carried more weight than wealth. Character was the foundation of long partnership, and communities' new daily habits revealed it best. As twilight approaches and lanterns begin appearing along narrow streets, we see that medieval dating advice was not only about attracting someone, it was about building harmony within a community. Love was never entirely private. It connected families, neighbors, and future generations. So the rituals, the colors, the shared cups, and the quiet observations all worked together. They slowed relationships down. They allowed people time to understand one another without sudden pressure. The process may appear. And as the evening settles gently over rooftops and distant bells echo once more, we move further into this world, where even music, dancing, and festivals carried their own unexpected rules of romance, guiding hearts as carefully as any written advice. Night has now fully arrived, and with it comes one of the most important parts of medieval social life: gatherings. Unlike modern dating, where two people meet alone, medieval attraction often grew during shared celebrations. Feasts, seasonal fairs, and village festivals created safe spaces where interaction was allowed, observed, and quietly encouraged. In these moments, behavior mattered even more than words. At a festival, music drifted through the open air from simple instruments, fiddles, flutes, and drums keeping a steady rhythm. People gathered in circles and dancing began. But dancing was not only entertainment. It was considered a form of communication. Medieval advice manuals actually described how a person should behave during a dance if they wished to show interest respectfully. A suitor was advised never to rush forward. Instead, he waited patiently at the edge of the gathering. Approaching too quickly suggested impulsiveness. A calm, steady invitation showed control and courtesy. If accepted, the dance itself followed quiet rules. Hands were held lightly, never tightly. Movements were measured. The purpose was not performance, but harmony. A dancer who moved too wildly or drew attention to himself appeared unreliable. Even walking someone back toward their group carried meaning. The path taken, the pace chosen, and the distance kept all signaled character. Standing too close showed impatience. Standing too far showed indifference. Balance was everything. Medieval culture believed behavior in small moments revealed how a person would behave in marriage. Feasts created similar opportunities. Long wooden tables filled halls, and people ate together while talking softly. Advice writers warned strongly against overeating or drinking excessively when hoping to impress someone. Appetite suggested personality. Moderation meant discipline and self-control. A calm presence at the table was far more attractive than bold conversation. Conversation topics were also guided carefully. A person was encouraged to speak about everyday matters: harvests, weather, animals, travel, or simple stories, rather than complaints or arguments. Harsh speech damaged reputation quickly in a small community. Gentle speech showed patience. Listeners valued kindness more than cleverness. There were also surprising warnings about silence. Complete quietness could appear cold, yet constant talking appeared self-centered. The ideal behavior was attentive listening, followed by thoughtful response. Medieval writers described good conversation almost like shared breathing. One speaks, one listens, and the rhythm stays calm. Music itself played a role in attraction. Learning a simple instrument or song was considered appealing because it showed dedication and emotional awareness. A quiet melody performed during a gathering could express admiration without direct confession. Words were powerful, but melody softened them. Some regions even practiced supervised walks after gatherings. Families allowed short walks in groups along safe paths. These walks were not private dates, but gentle chances to speak more freely. Reputation remained protected, while connection deepened gradually. Trust grew step by step rather than through sudden promises. Interestingly, medieval advice warned against dramatic declarations of love. Grand speeches or exaggerated vows were seen as unstable. True affection was shown through consistent behavior over time, repeated kindness, reliability, and respectful patience. The community observed these actions carefully. As the celebration slowly ends and torches burn lower, people return to their homes under a quiet sky. No moment seemed extraordinary, yet each small action carried meaning. Courtship in the medieval world was a long conversation made from gestures, shared spaces, and steady behavior rather than sudden emotion. And as footsteps fade along the darkened paths and doors close gently behind them, we continue onward into another aspect of this unusual advice: the careful involvement of families, matchmakers, and neighbors, who all quietly influenced the path of affection in ways both helpful and surprising. By the next morning, something important becomes clear. In the medieval world, love was never only between two people. It was surrounded by many quiet observers: parents, relatives, neighbors, and sometimes even local elders. Courtship did not unfold in secrecy. It unfolded within a community, and this created some of the most unusual dating advice of all. Families paid close attention, not to control feelings but to protect stability. Marriage affected land, safety, and survival. Because life was difficult and resources limited, a poor match could harm both households. So medieval advice often encouraged patience not just for romance but for responsibility. Before strong affection was expressed openly, a family quietly learned about the suitor. This investigation was rarely dramatic. No confrontations, no loud questioning. Instead, people observed behavior over time. Did the person keep promises? Did they arrive when they said they would? Did they treat animals gently? Did they speak respectfully to elders? These small details mattered far more than bold words. A charming speech lasted a moment. Daily habits revealed character. Sometimes a respected neighbor acted as a gentle intermediary. We might call such a person a matchmaker, though their role was softer than modern matchmaking. They did not arrange marriages directly. Instead, they shared impressions between families, easing uncertainty. A trusted elder might quietly reassure one household that the other family was honorable. This reduced fear and allowed affection to grow calmly. Medieval writers even advised young people not to hide their intentions too long. Secret relationships created gossip, and gossip damaged reputation quickly in small towns. Openness, once feelings became serious, was considered a form of respect. A relationship acknowledged by families became safer for everyone involved. One particularly curious piece of advice warned against sudden emotional promises. A person was discouraged from saying they would love forever too quickly. Medieval thinkers believed deep commitment should follow proven reliability. The words mattered less than consistency. Returning again and again, behaving kindly again and again, that was considered the real declaration. Meals between families were often the next step. These were not formal negotiations at first, but shared visits. Food created comfort. Sitting together allowed people to observe not only the couple, but the entire household. Harmony between families was seen as essential for a peaceful marriage. Dowries and property discussions eventually appeared, but surprisingly, many advice texts suggested these topics should not dominate early meetings. They were necessary but secondary. Trust and reputation came first. Without them, agreements meant little. Even disagreements were watched carefully. A respectful disagreement handled calmly actually improved a suitor's standing. It showed patience and emotional control. Anger, however small, spread concern quickly. Medieval society valued steadiness above passion. As midday sunlight fills the narrow streets, everyday life continues. People working, repairing tools, tending animals. Yet within this ordinary rhythm, a relationship slowly forms, supported by many quiet conversations occurring behind doors and across kitchen tables. Love is not rushed. It is tested gently by time and observation. By evening, lanterns glow once more. Nothing dramatic has happened, yet trust has deepened. The medieval idea of attraction was not sudden excitement. It was growing certainty. Two people were not only choosing each other, two families were learning to share a future. And as the night settles again over the town, we move further into another set of unusual beliefs. The advice medieval people followed to avoid heartbreak, jealousy, and misunderstanding hoping to keep affection steady once it finally began. As another evening settles over the rooftops, a quieter concern begins to appear in medieval advice. Not how to begin love, but how to protect it. Medieval writers believed affection was fragile. One of the most repeated instructions warned strongly against jealousy. In a small community, people saw each other daily. Conversations happened naturally at wells, markets, and gatherings. A person who reacted harshly to ordinary interaction risked embarrassment and distrust. So advice manuals explained that trust itself was attractive. A partner who remained calm and secure showed maturity. A partner who demanded constant reassurance created worry. To avoid jealousy, medieval couples were encouraged to maintain dignity in public spaces. Excessive displays of affection were discouraged, not because emotion was forbidden, but because attention invited gossip. Reputation could shift quickly, and rumors were difficult to correct. By behaving modestly in public, two people protected each other's honor. There was also guidance about letters and messages. In towns where literacy existed, written notes sometimes carried feelings that could not be spoken openly. Yet writers warned against writing too often. Too many letters suggested impatience. Too few suggested indifference. The recommended balance was occasional and thoughtful, a single message that showed care without creating pressure. Words were meant to comfort, not overwhelm. Advice even extended to tone of voice. Gentle speech was considered essential. Raising one's voice during disagreement was thought to damage affection deeply, because it created fear rather than understanding. Calm explanation allowed conflict to pass without lasting harm. Medieval people understood that long relationships required emotional steadiness more than perfect agreement. Interestingly, writers also warned about overpraising. Constant compliments could feel insincere. Instead, admiration should be specific and occasional. A simple acknowledgement of kindness or effort meant more than repeated declarations of beauty. They believed appreciation rooted in observation strengthened connection. Time apart was another surprising recommendation. Couples were not expected to spend every moment together. Continuing daily responsibilities, work, family duties, and friendships created balance. Absence in moderation allowed anticipation to grow. Medieval thinkers believed constant closeness weakened respect, while measured distance maintained it. There were also gentle rituals to repair tension. Sharing a meal after disagreement, walking together in daylight, or participating in a common task helped restore harmony. Action mattered more than apology alone. Cooperation rebuilt trust naturally. Even advice about silence appeared. When emotions became strong, it was recommended to pause conversation rather than argue immediately. Calm returned more easily when both people allowed time for reflection. In a world without instant communication, patience came naturally, and patience often prevented regret. As night deepens and quiet spreads through narrow lanes, we see that medieval dating advice was not only about attracting a partner, but learning to live peacefully beside another person. The goal was not dramatic romance. The goal was lasting companionship built on reliability and mutual respect. And as distant sounds fade and windows darken one by one, we continue onward into yet another unusual part of this world. The curious warnings, omens, and protective customs medieval people followed to guard their relationships from bad fortune and emotional disappointment. Later that same night, when most homes grow quiet and only a few candles still glow behind shuttered windows, we enter a part of medieval courtship that feels especially unfamiliar today: protection. Medieval people believed love could be influenced not only by behavior, but also by unseen forces, by luck, and by the fragile balance of everyday life. Because uncertainty surrounded them in many areas of existence, they naturally extended this thinking to relationships as well. One common belief held that a new relationship should begin gently and without announcement. Speaking too proudly or too publicly about affection was thought to invite misfortune. The idea was simple: happiness should be guarded while it was still young. A couple might act normally in public, exchanging only polite conversation, while privately understanding that a deeper connection had begun. This was not secrecy born from fear, but caution born from hope. Protective habits followed this thinking. Some people carried small tokens: a smooth stone from a familiar path, a ribbon worn during a meaningful meeting, or a tiny carved piece of wood. These objects were not seen as magical charms. Medieval advice also warned against sudden changes in behavior. If a person who had been kind and patient suddenly became overly intense, it worried families and friends. Stability was the strongest sign of genuine affection. Writers encouraged lovers to behave as they always had, simply with slightly greater care and attention. Love should improve character quietly, not transform personality overnight. There were also seasonal customs. Spring gatherings were considered especially suitable for strengthening relationships because they symbolized growth and renewal. Couples were encouraged to spend time outdoors in daylight, walking along familiar roads or fields. Shared ordinary activity built comfort far more effectively than dramatic gestures. The rhythm of walking side by side allowed conversation to flow naturally without pressure. Advice texts even addressed misunderstandings caused by silence. If one person seemed distant for a short time, the other was advised not to assume rejection immediately. Illness, work obligations, or family duties often interrupted communication. Quick conclusions created unnecessary hurt. Patience preserved harmony. Another curious instruction involved gratitude. A person was encouraged to acknowledge small acts of kindness, a helpful task, thoughtful advice, or simple companionship. Gratitude strengthened emotional bonds because it showed awareness. Medieval writers believed appreciation was one of the most reliable ways to maintain affection. Communities also played a quiet, protective role. Neighbors often treated a developing relationship gently, allowing conversations to occur without interruption while avoiding gossip. This unspoken cooperation helped relationships mature safely. The town itself became a supportive environment. As midnight approaches, the streets fall almost completely silent. Only a distant breeze moves along the walls and rooftops. Within homes, people rest, and within those homes, relationships continue to grow slowly. not through dramatic declarations, but through steady behavior repeated day after day. In this world, love was not expected to be sudden or overwhelming. It was expected to endure. Every piece of advice, from patience to small tokens, aimed at preserving calm, trust, and emotional balance. Medieval people understood something simple. Affection survives best when protected from haste. And as the quiet night continues, we move gently onward into the final set of unusual guidance. The lessons medieval society offered once courtship was accepted, and two people prepared to turn careful companionship into lifelong partnership. Morning returns slowly once again, pale light slipping through narrow windows and across stone floors. And now the relationship has reached a new stage. The families understand. The neighbors quietly know. No grand announcement has been made, yet the change is clear to everyone around them. In the medieval world, this moment mattered deeply because courtship was no longer only about attraction. It was about preparation for a shared life. And here the advice becomes even more surprising. Medieval writers did not suddenly shift toward celebration or excitement. Instead, they became calmer. They believed the strongest love was the one that could survive ordinary days. Because of this, much of their dating guidance focused on daily habits rather than romance. One instruction appeared again and again: learn to work beside one another. A couple was encouraged to share simple tasks long before marriage. Carrying water, helping with food preparation, tending animals, or organizing household items allowed them to observe each other in natural situations. Kindness shown during routine work revealed far more than polite conversation during festivals. Patience during small difficulties was considered one of the clearest signs of compatibility. Another unusual recommendation warned against trying to appear perfect. Medieval advisors believed constant politeness without honesty created distance. If something was difficult or tiring, acknowledging it calmly showed trust. A person who pretended to be endlessly cheerful seemed unreliable. Real companionship required comfort in ordinary moods, not only in happy moments. Money and resources were discussed gently but directly. Instead of romantic promises, couples were encouraged to speak about responsibilities, food storage, seasonal work, and support of relatives. This may sound practical rather than emotional, yet medieval thinking saw security as a form of affection. Providing stability was considered an expression of care. Meals together gained special meaning. Sharing bread and simple food symbolized partnership. Writers suggested eating slowly and speaking kindly during meals because this daily ritual would continue throughout marriage. The tone set at the table often shaped the tone of the household itself. There was also advice about disagreement. Instead of avoiding conflict completely, couples were told to practice resolving small disagreements early. A calm conversation over a minor difference prepared them for future challenges. Harmony was not the absence of disagreement, but the ability to return to peace afterward. Interestingly, medieval guidance emphasized laughter as well, but quiet laughter. Gentle humor during ordinary work relieved tension and created comfort. Loud mockery or sharp teasing, however, was strongly discouraged. Respect preserved closeness. Even walking together through familiar streets carried importance. Repeated shared routes created shared memory. Familiarity built emotional stability. Over time, the relationship became part of the environment itself, woven into daily surroundings. As the day continues, it becomes clear that medieval dating advice was not really about impressing someone. It was about learning whether two lives could move steadily in the same direction. Romance was not treated as a moment, but as a pattern repeated across many small experiences. By evening, the town grows calm again. Candles are lit, doors close softly, and quiet conversations continue indoors. There are no dramatic declarations, no sudden transformations. Instead, there is growing certainty. Through shared tasks, gentle honesty, and consistent behavior, affection has deepened into trust. And as night settles once more over the rooftops and the last sounds of the day fade away, we move closer to understanding the final lesson medieval people believed about love. That lasting companionship was built not by grand passion, but by steady care repeated across countless peaceful days. Now the relationship has quietly reached the stage medieval people considered the most serious moment of all: intention. No dramatic proposal takes place yet. Instead, a slower and calmer process begins, one that feels very different from modern expectations. In medieval society, commitment was not a sudden question asked in a single evening. It was a gradual understanding built through repeated signs of reliability. The first sign was consistency. A suitor continued visiting respectfully, speaking politely with family members, and showing the same behavior day after day. Medieval writers believed anyone could appear kind once, but only a sincere person could remain kind over time. Regular presence proved dedication better than promises ever could. Then came a curious form of communication: indirect speech. Instead of saying openly, "I wish to marry," the suitor might begin by speaking with a parent or elder about future responsibilities, work plans, or living arrangements. These conversations signaled intention without pressure. They allowed families to prepare emotionally and practically, while preserving dignity for everyone involved. Advice texts strongly warned against surprise proposals. Sudden declarations created embarrassment and anxiety. A person should never feel cornered into giving an answer. Instead, understanding was built slowly so that when the question finally appeared, the answer was already gently known. There were also customs involving shared time in daylight. Evening meetings were limited, but daytime visits became more frequent once commitment was near. Sunlight symbolized openness and honesty. A relationship ready for marriage should not need shadows or secrecy. Community awareness now supported the bond rather than observing it from a distance. Small preparations followed. Families discussed sleeping arrangements, household roles, and seasonal duties. These conversations might seem unromantic today, yet medieval thinkers believed clear expectations prevented later conflict. Love was strengthened when daily life was predictable and secure. Another unusual piece of advice concerned tone. When speaking about future plans, a person was encouraged to remain calm and realistic. Overly emotional speeches were discouraged because they created uncertainty. Steady confidence reassured both families that the relationship rested on stability, rather than excitement alone. Gifts changed as well. Earlier tokens symbolized attraction. Now practical gifts appeared: useful tools, cloth, or household items. These objects showed readiness to build a shared home. Their meaning was quiet but powerful. Affection was becoming partnership. Community members often reacted gently too. Neighbors offered small kindnesses, assistance, or advice, not as interference but as support. Marriage joined not only two individuals but the social network around them. Stability within one household strengthened the entire village. As evening approaches once more and warm light fades across the streets, a peaceful certainty fills the air. Nothing dramatic has happened, yet everything has changed. The relationship no longer depends on hints and cautious observation. It now rests on trust recognized by others. The medieval world believed love should feel calm at this stage, not overwhelming. A peaceful heart was taken as a good sign. Anxiety suggested uncertainty, but quiet confidence meant readiness. The goal was not excitement. It was assurance that two people could face ordinary life side by side. And as night falls gently over the town again, we move toward the final understanding medieval society held about romance. That the strange advice, the slow rituals, and the patient courtship all existed for one purpose: to create a partnership capable of lasting through years, seasons, and the steady passage of time. By now, the slow rhythm of medieval courtship has carried us to the quiet threshold between promise and permanence. The families understand. The couple understands. The community senses what is coming. Yet even here, medieval advice does not rush forward into dramatic celebration. Instead, it pauses and offers one final layer of guidance that may be the strangest of all. Prepare your character more than your ceremony. In medieval thought, marriage was not the climax of romance. It was the beginning of responsibility. Because of this, writers spent surprisingly little time describing grand weddings and far more time describing inner behavior. They warned that affection alone could not carry two people through years of shared work, illness, weather, and change. What mattered most was steadiness of temperament. One common piece of advice encouraged couples to observe each other during moments of inconvenience. Not during festivals or happy days, but during small frustrations, a delayed task, a broken tool, a rainy afternoon that ruined plans. How did the other respond? With anger, with blame, or with patience? Medieval observers believed these moments revealed more truth than any poem ever could. There were also warnings about pride. A partner who insisted on always being correct risked creating quiet resentment. Humility, even in minor disagreements, was seen as strength rather than weakness. Saying, "Perhaps you are right," was considered a gesture of maturity. Peace in the household was valued more than personal victory. Another unusual belief concerned routine. Medieval advisors encouraged couples to establish daily. Some texts even described love as something that should feel quiet, not dull but calm. Excitement was natural in early attraction, but enduring partnership felt steady. A peaceful feeling in one's chest, rather than racing emotion, was interpreted as readiness for lifelong commitment. Community elders often offered gentle reminders too. They spoke of seasons, how spring brings warmth but winter always returns. A relationship built only for spring would struggle in winter, but one built on mutual respect would endure both. Even the ceremony itself, when it arrived, reflected this mindset. It was less about spectacle and more about acknowledgement. Witnesses mattered. Public recognition meant support. Marriage was a social contract as much as a romantic union. Strangely, medieval advice rarely promised eternal happiness. Instead, it promised shared endurance. Writers spoke of companionship as walking side by side through ordinary days. The success of love was measured not in passion, but in cooperation, loyalty, and the absence of chaos. As evening settles once more over our imagined town, something feels complete. The long path from first glance to mutual understanding has unfolded without haste. There were no sudden swipes, no instant declarations, no impulsive decisions. Every stage was filtered through patience, observation, and gentle guidance. And when night finally grows deep and still, we understand the candles burn lower. The streets grow silent. Somewhere behind wooden doors, two people prepare to begin a life shaped by all the strange, cautious, and thoughtful advice that guided them here. After the quiet acknowledgement of commitment, medieval writers believed the real test of affection truly began. Courtship had allowed two people to learn about one another slowly, but now they were expected to practice something far more difficult. Living beside another person every single day without letting familiarity turn into carelessness. And so, some of the most unusual advice appeared not before the relationship, but immediately after it was accepted. One repeated instruction was surprisingly gentle. Never stop behaving politely. Medieval thinkers worried that once a couple felt secure, they might abandon the small courtesies that had built their bond. They warned that affection weakened not through dramatic arguments but through small neglects, an unkind tone, impatience, or ignoring a partner's effort. Simple greetings each morning and calm words each evening were recommended to preserve respect. There was also guidance about shared silence. Unlike modern expectations of constant conversation, medieval advice valued quiet companionship. Two people working in the same room without speaking were not considered distant. Instead, they were comfortable. Peaceful silence showed trust. A partner who could sit beside you without needing attention was seen as dependable. Another curious suggestion concerned gratitude within routine life. A person was encouraged to acknowledge everyday tasks, preparing food, repairing clothing, organizing tools, not as obligations, but as acts of care. Recognizing effort prevented resentment from forming slowly. Writers believed appreciation acted almost like maintenance for the relationship, preventing wear before it appeared. Medieval advisors also warned strongly against comparison. Looking at another household and wishing for different circumstances created dissatisfaction. Instead, couples were encouraged to focus on their own shared stability. Contentment was considered a learned habit. By valuing what was present, affection remained steady. They even addressed fatigue. After long workdays, tempers naturally There were also gentle reminders about laughter. Not loud teasing or mockery, but shared humor over ordinary moments. A small mistake during cooking, an unexpected event during work, or a minor inconvenience turned into a story. Laughing together transformed difficulty into memory rather than conflict. Some texts advised couples to occasionally spend brief time apart during the day, continuing individual tasks and friendships. Separation, in moderation, renewed appreciation. Returning to one another in the evening felt intentional rather than automatic. Even apology carried guidance. A simple acknowledgement of fault, spoken calmly and without defensiveness, was considered powerful. Long explanations or justifications often prolonged tension. Direct honesty restored peace more quickly. As evening falls once again and the sounds of the town quiet, we begin to understand medieval wisdom more clearly. The strange advice was not meant to create dramatic romance. It was meant to prevent slow erosion of goodwill. Relationships did not usually fail suddenly. They weakened gradually through repeated small moments. And so medieval society focused on protecting those moments. Polite words, patient listening, gratitude, humor, and rest. These simple practices, repeated day after day, turned courtship into companionship and companionship into enduring partnership. The night grows calm again, and within that calm we continue forward, discovering how medieval people believed love was not maintained by passion alone, but by daily attention quietly given and quietly received. As the days continue to pass in our quiet medieval town, another piece of guidance slowly appears, and it may be the most unexpected of all. Medieval writers believed love could fade not because people stopped caring, but because they stopped noticing. Familiarity, they warned, could gently turn wonder into routine if it was not protected with awareness. So they offered advice that feels almost reflective. A person was encouraged to observe their partner as if they were still learning about them, not watching critically, but attentively. The way they spoke to others, how they handled small difficulties, how they helped neighbors, or how they reacted to simple joys like a good harvest or clear weather. Continual noticing kept respect alive. When someone felt seen, closeness remained strong. There were also suggestions about speech during ordinary days. Medieval culture valued calm explanation over assumption. If confusion appeared, couples were advised to ask quietly rather than imagine intention. Misunderstanding often grew from silence, and silence left alone slowly created distance. Gentle clarification prevented long worry. Writers also warned against carrying frustration from one day into the next. Before sleep, disagreements were meant to soften, even if not fully solved. The reasoning was simple. Rest restored patience. Beginning a new day with old anger made small problems feel larger than they truly were. Letting the mind settle overnight protected harmony. Another curious instruction involved memory. Couples were encouraged to recall the early days of their courtship occasionally. The first meetings, the shared walks, the careful conversations. Not to return to uncertainty, but to remember intention. Memory reminded them why trust had formed. Reflection strengthened present stability. Medieval advice even included kindness during illness. When one partner felt unwell, extra patience and gentle care carried great importance. Health was uncertain in the Middle Ages, and compassion during weakness created powerful emotional bonds. Care shown in difficult moments lasted longer in memory than happiness during easy ones. There was guidance about decision-making as well. Major choices were recommended to be discussed calmly and slowly. Acting alone might be faster, but acting together created unity. Agreement did not need to be immediate. Time allowed both minds to feel settled. As afternoon light stretches across the narrow streets and daily tasks finish, a peaceful rhythm returns again. The relationship is no longer new, yet it is not taken for granted. Attention, patience, and small gestures keep it alive quietly. By evening, candles flicker once more behind. The medieval world understood something simple yet deep. Love did not disappear suddenly. It faded only when ignored. By continuing to notice one another, two people preserved not only affection, but companionship itself. And as night settles softly across rooftops and distant sounds fade away, we move gently onward toward the final understanding medieval society held, that all their strange dating advice ultimately aimed to create peace within a shared life that could endure the passing years. As the seasons begin to change and cooler air moves across the fields outside our quiet town, medieval advice turns toward one final concern: endurance. Courtship had guided two people together. Daily habits had kept harmony, but writers knew time itself could challenge affection. Years would pass, circumstances would shift, and so they offered guidance not for beginnings, but for longevity. One repeated lesson was to protect routine greetings. Each morning, even after many years, partners were encouraged to acknowledge one another kindly. A simple welcome at the start of the day set the tone for everything that followed. Medieval thinkers believed relationships rarely failed because of a single major event. Instead, they weakened slowly when daily courtesy disappeared. Politeness, maintained over years, acted like steady support beneath the bond. There was also careful advice about memory and storytelling. Couples were encouraged to share stories of past events, harvest successes, journeys, childhood memories, and early moments of their relationship. Speaking about shared history strengthened identity. Over time, two individuals began to feel like a single household with a continuous narrative. Memory created belonging. Another unusual suggestion involved shared responsibility during difficulty. When hardship appeared, poor weather, limited resources, or illness, blame was to be avoided completely. Medieval writers warned that searching for fault damaged trust far more than the hardship itself. Instead, partners were advised to face challenges side by side, speaking of our problem rather than your mistake. Cooperation preserved respect. Advice also addressed aging. Physical appearance would inevitably change, and medieval authors openly acknowledged this. They encouraged appreciation for character rather than appearance. Kindness, reliability, and familiar presence became the foundation of affection as years passed. The relationship was expected to deepen, not diminish. There were even recommendations about tone during correction. If one partner made an error, guidance should be offered gently and privately. Public embarrassment harmed both people. Quiet conversation protected dignity and allowed improvement without resentment. Community life remained important as well. Participating together in gatherings, assisting neighbors, and sharing responsibilities outside the home strengthened the relationship inside it. Couples who isolated themselves risked tension, while those who remained connected to others gained perspective and support. Even evening routines carried meaning. Ending the day calmly, speaking peacefully before rest, allowed worries to settle. Medieval thinkers believed sleep following conflict disturbed both mind and health. Quiet closure, even after disagreement, restored emotional balance. As twilight settles again across rooftops and smoke rises slowly from hearths, we begin to understand the purpose behind all this unusual guidance. Medieval dating advice was never only about attraction. It was a long preparation for companionship lasting through changing seasons of life. The strange rituals, the patience, the steady behavior, all worked toward one simple hope: that two people could live together without fear, without constant tension, and with mutual respect, growing stronger year after year. And as darkness deepens once more and the town grows silent, we move gently toward the final reflections of this journey, where medieval wisdom reveals what it truly believed love was meant to become. Not excitement, not performance, but peaceful partnership carried quietly across a lifetime. As winter finally settles over the countryside and frost gathers along the wooden fences outside the town, medieval advice reaches its calmest and most reflective stage. At this point, the relationship is no longer new. They believed the purpose of courtship had never been excitement. It had been preparation for ordinary days. Because in medieval life, most days were not celebrations. They were quiet, repetitive, and practical. Wood had to be gathered, food prepared, clothing repaired, and responsibilities shared. If affection depended only on strong emotion, it would fade quickly. So advice now focused on protecting calm companionship. One common instruction was to value presence. A partner sitting nearby, even without conversation, was considered comforting. Medieval households were rarely silent, yet shared quiet moments, working by the hearth, preparing tools, or simply resting after labor. Created a deep sense of stability. Familiar presence reduced worry. People felt less alone facing difficult seasons. There was also guidance about expectation. Writers warned couples not to demand constant attention from one another. Daily duties required focus, and allowing each person to complete their tasks peacefully prevented frustration. Respecting space was seen as kindness, not distance. Trust allowed independence without weakening connection. Another surprising idea concerned gratitude for predictability. Seeing the same person return home each evening, hearing familiar footsteps, and sharing the same simple meals built emotional security. Medieval thinkers valued reliability more than novelty. A stable routine meant safety in an uncertain world. Advice even addressed disagreement during long partnerships. Instead of trying to resolve every difference completely, couples were encouraged to accept minor imperfections. Harmony did not require perfect agreement. It required patience and the ability to move forward together despite small differences. They also emphasized gentle care during aging and hardship. Supporting one another through illness, fatigue, and changing strength was seen as the highest form of affection. The relationship matured from attraction into guardianship, each person watching over the other's well-being. By evening, snow settles softly outside and warm light fills the interior of homes. Nothing dramatic occurs, yet the importance of the moment is clear. Love, in medieval understanding, was not proven through grand gestures, but through steady companionship maintained across years. And so all the strange advice, patience in meeting, caution in speech, small tokens, careful behavior, and quiet rituals, finally reveals its meaning. It was never really about dating at all. It was about learning how to live peacefully with another human being in a world where survival depended on cooperation. As the night grows still and the town rests beneath the winter sky, we reach the final understanding medieval society carried. Affection that endures is not loud. It is gentle, consistent, and calm, built from countless ordinary moments shared side by side. And now, as our long walk through the medieval world slowly approaches its quiet, they encouraged couples to occasionally pause and look back on how their relationship had grown, not with regret or longing for earlier excitement, but with calm understanding. The awkward first conversations, the careful glances in public places, the shared walks through familiar streets, all these memories formed the foundation of trust. Remembering them reminded both people that companionship had been built step by step, not granted suddenly. One last unusual instruction warned against taking certainty for granted. Even after years together, partners were advised to continue small gestures of respect, speaking kindly when tired, listening fully when the other spoke, and acknowledging effort prevented affection from becoming automatic. Habit alone could keep people together, but attention kept them close. There was also advice about peaceful evenings. Before rest, the household was encouraged to settle into calm conversation or quiet activity. Ending the day gently allowed worries to release. Medieval thinkers believed the tone of evening shaped the tone of tomorrow. Restful nights created patient mornings. They even spoke about gratitude not just toward each other, but toward the shared life itself, the home maintained together, the meals prepared, the problems solved side by side. Appreciation for the ordinary strengthened contentment. When ordinary moments were valued, disappointment appeared less often. In truth, all the strange medieval dating advice had pointed toward one simple idea. As darkness settles across the town one final time, the streets empty and the last candlelight glows softly behind wooden shutters. Somewhere inside, two people sit quietly near a fading fire, speaking little, yet comfortable in silence. No grand romance fills the air. Instead, there is peace, the peaceful understanding that neither stands alone. And that was the true goal of medieval courtship. Not excitement, not dramatic passion, but a shared life where both people could rest without fear, supported by familiarity and mutual care. So we leave the town gently now, its narrow streets quiet beneath the night sky, carrying with us the realization that even the strangest advice often held a simple purpose: helping people live together with patience, respect, and calm companionship through the long passage of time. Let us remain a little longer in this quiet medieval world, because the writers of the time believed the final lesson about relationships was not learned at the beginning, nor even during marriage, but after long familiarity had settled into everyday life. By now, the couple no longer wondered whether affection existed. Instead, they faced a different challenge: how to keep closeness alive when life became predictable. Medieval people understood something very human. When two people see each other every single day, the mind slowly stops paying attention, not from dislike, but from comfort. Familiarity brought peace, yet it could also quietly reduce appreciation. So advice began to focus on awareness. Writers encouraged couples to deliberately notice small details again. The way a partner arranged tools after work, the care taken when preparing food, the effort made to repair clothing before winter, the patience shown toward neighbors or children. These ordinary actions were meant to be seen and acknowledged. Respect grew when effort was recognized. Ignoring effort slowly weakened warmth. Another unexpected suggestion was to occasionally speak of the future together, even after many years. Not dramatic dreams, but simple plans. The next season's harvest, repairs to the home, or preparation for colder months. Shared planning reminded both partners they were still moving forward side by side. A relationship that only repeated yesterday could feel stagnant, but one that gently looked ahead felt alive. Medieval writers also warned against harsh words spoken in moments of irritation. Anger was not forbidden, because they knew it was natural, but quick speech was discouraged. Words once spoken remained in memory far longer than the feeling that caused them. They advised pausing before responding, allowing the mind to calm. Silence for a moment often prevented regret for years. There was guidance about reassurance as well. Even after long partnership, people still needed to feel valued. Small affirmations, thanking a partner, speaking kindly about their work, or acknowledging their presence, restored comfort. Security did not remove the need for appreciation. Even shared routine activities held meaning. Sitting together after the day's work, repairing tools, sorting grain, or simply resting by the hearth allowed companionship without effort. These quiet, shared moments strengthened trust more than any celebration. The medieval world recognized that peace was the real foundation of closeness. Community observers often noticed the strongest relationships were not the loudest or most dramatic ones. They were the calm households where voices remained gentle, where disagreements ended quickly, and where mutual help appeared naturally. Outsiders might see nothing remarkable, yet stability itself was remarkable in a difficult world. Advice also addressed aging once more. As strength changed and energy slowed, patience became even more important. Helping one another with tasks, walking more slowly together, and adjusting expectations showed loyalty. Care replaced excitement, and care was considered the deepest expression of attachment. By evening, the familiar rhythm returns again. Lamps glow softly, doors close against the night air, and the town settles into silence. Inside one home, two people sit side by side, speaking only occasionally. No one is performing kindness. It simply exists. That to medieval thinkers was the success of courtship fulfilled, not constant emotion, but reliable comfort. All the strange dating advice we have explored now reveals its final purpose. The careful meetings, the patience, the slow conversations, the practical gifts, the quiet routines. They trained two people to live peacefully together. Love was not measured by intensity, but by steadiness. And as the night deepens and the world grows still, we remain a moment longer in that peaceful household, where affection has become something gentle and dependable, lasting not because it was dramatic, but because it was tended carefully day after day, season after season, year after year. Stay with the town a little longer, because medieval writers believed one final habit protected relationships more than anything else: shared understanding of daily life. They knew affection could weaken when one person felt alone in responsibility, even if both people still cared deeply. So they offered guidance that seemed simple but carried great meaning: learn each other's burdens. A partner was encouraged to understand not only emotions but duties. What work filled the other person's day? What tired them? What worried them as evening approached? Medieval life required constant effort: gathering supplies, preparing food, repairing tools, maintaining the household through changing seasons. When one person recognized the labor of the other, appreciation naturally followed. Because of this, writers suggested occasional role sharing. Helping with a task not normally performed allowed each partner to see the difficulty firsthand. Carrying water, organizing stores, assisting with repairs, or tending animals created empathy. Understanding replaced assumption. Once difficulty was understood, patience increased. Another unusual instruction was to speak well of one's partner to others. Public respect mattered. Kind words shared with neighbors or relatives strengthened trust within the household. A person who defended their partner's reputation protected the relationship itself. Medieval society valued honor, and honor extended into private affection. There was also guidance about listening without solving immediately. When a partner described a problem, the response was not always advice. Sometimes quiet attention was enough. Being heard eased worry. Medieval writers observed that comfort often came from presence rather than solutions. Time together during peaceful moments was encouraged as well. Not only during work, but during rest. Sitting outside in daylight, walking slowly through familiar paths, or watching ordinary activity in the town allowed conversation to happen naturally. Without pressure, people spoke more honestly. Even meals were treated carefully. Eating together regularly was considered essential. Shared meals created routine communication. They were daily opportunities to reconnect after separate tasks. Skipping this habit risked distance over time. Writers also warned about carrying pride into the home. Outside the household, reputation and status mattered greatly, but inside the home, humility preserved harmony. A person who insisted on authority in every matter created tension. Cooperation created calm. As evening settles once again and warm light fills the small rooms, we see the result of this advice. A peaceful household is not silent because nothing happens. It is calm because understanding exists. Each person knows the other's effort and respects it. The medieval world understood something lasting. Affection grows strongest where respect lives daily, not in dramatic moments, but in shared routine, patient listening. And as night falls gently across rooftops and the last sounds fade into stillness, we continue quietly forward toward the final reflections. The simple truth medieval people slowly discovered about love after a lifetime spent side by side. Now, as our journey nears its calm conclusion, medieval writers turned their attention to something they rarely spoke of directly: time itself. They understood that affection did not remain unchanged. Years passed, children grew, Responsibilities shifted, and people themselves slowly became different from who they once were. Because of this, some of the most thoughtful advice they left behind concerned adaptation. They believed a strong relationship was not one that never changed, but one that changed gently together. When habits altered or circumstances shifted, couples were encouraged to adjust patiently rather than resist. The person you first met would not remain exactly the same after many seasons, and neither would you. Accepting this prevented disappointment. Instead of trying to preserve the past, medieval guidance suggested preserving kindness. There was also advice about remembering intention. During courtship, both people had behaved carefully, speaking thoughtfully, and listening attentively. Writers warned that familiarity sometimes caused people to stop trying, so they encouraged continuing small efforts. A kind greeting, a moment of attention, a simple shared conversation at the end of the day. These gestures did not need to be grand. Their power came from repetition. Another curious instruction involved walking together during calm moments. A short walk outside the home, even along the same path each time, allowed worries to ease. Movement helped conversation flow naturally. Many disagreements softened simply because two people spoke side by side, rather than face-to-face in tension. They also spoke about forgiveness. Small mistakes were inevitable in daily life. Holding every fault in memory created distance. Releasing minor grievances preserved peace. Medieval society did not expect perfection. It expected patience. Even quiet companionship held importance. Sitting together in the evening without speaking was not seen as emptiness, but as comfort. The absence of tension meant trust existed. After years, love expressed itself through presence more than words. By late evening, the town rests once more under dim starlight. The noise of markets and gatherings has faded, leaving only the steady rhythm of ordinary life. Inside homes, conversations soften, lamps burn lower, and calm fills familiar rooms. At last we understand the meaning behind all the strange advice we have followed through these parts. Medieval dating guidance was never truly about winning someone's heart. It was about learning how to keep it gently over time. The rituals slowed people down so they could see clearly. The patience prevented regret. The quiet routines protected stability. What appeared unusual to modern eyes was simply a long preparation for companionship. And as the night grows deeper and stillness settles across rooftops and narrow streets, we leave this medieval town peacefully, carrying a simple realization. The people of that distant age believed lasting affection was not created by dramatic passion, but by steady care repeated across a lifetime. Let us slow down even further, because there is still one more layer to uncover. A layer that medieval writers rarely stated directly, yet quietly built into all their strange instructions. Beneath the rituals, beneath the patience, beneath the warnings about jealousy and pride, there was a deeper belief about human nature itself. They believed love was less about excitement and more about discipline. Not discipline in a harsh sense, but in the steady shaping of one's own behavior. Medieval thinkers understood that attraction often began with emotion, but survival, especially in their world, depended on reliability. So the most unusual dating advice was not about flowers, poetry, or gifts. It was about self-control. A person hoping to build lasting affection was encouraged to master temper, to moderate speech, to rise early, to work diligently, and to avoid wastefulness. These habits were not romantic in appearance, yet they formed the invisible framework of trust. When someone demonstrated steady character in everyday life, attraction transformed into confidence. There was also a curious emphasis on reputation long after courtship ended. Even once a relationship was secure, both partners were expected to guard each other's name in public. Speaking poorly about one's partner outside the home was seen as betrayal. Public respect strengthened private closeness. In small towns where stories traveled quickly, reputation was fragile, and protecting it became a shared responsibility. Medieval writers also warned about complacency. They observed that when life felt predictable, people sometimes stopped expressing appreciation, so they recommended small, repeated acknowledgments, not dramatic speeches, but brief and sincere remarks. You handled that well. Thank you for your effort. I noticed your care. These words maintained warmth without creating spectacle. Another fascinating piece of guidance involved conflict resolution over time. If a disagreement returned repeatedly, couples were encouraged to examine the pattern calmly rather than react emotionally each time. Recognizing repetition allowed change. Ignoring repetition created resentment. Even without modern psychology, medieval advisors recognized cycles in behavior. There was advice about laughter too, but not only in moments of joy. Laughing gently during difficulty reduced fear. Turning small failures into stories prevented tension from settling into memory. Humor, when kind, protected closeness. And then there was silence, perhaps the most misunderstood element of all. Silence in medieval relationships did not always signal distance. It often meant comfort. Two people working side by side without constant words reflected stability. The absence of anxiety created peace. In a world filled with uncertainty, illness, weather, scarcity, emotional steadiness inside the home was priceless. As seasons passed, medieval couples were encouraged to accept change in one another without suspicion. Strength might weaken, energy might shift, responsibilities might grow. Love adapted. The expectation was not perfection, but loyalty. By now the town feels familiar to us. We know the narrow streets, the wooden doors, the steady rhythm of bells marking time. And inside one modest home, a relationship that once began with careful glances and slow conversation now rests in calm assurance. No dramatic declarations echo through the room. Instead, there is quiet cooperation, shared work, shared meals, shared rest. The bizarre dating advice of the Middle Ages, when viewed from a distance, seems less about romance and more about building an environment where two people could live without constant tension. It trained them to observe, to wait, to speak gently, to act steadily, and to protect one another's dignity. And as night falls again over rooftops and faint starlight touches the quiet streets, we see that the medieval world was not obsessed with passion. It was obsessed with endurance. Love in their understanding was not a moment of intensity. It was a long practice of patience. Now at last our long and gentle journey through medieval courtship begins to rest. The bells of the town no longer call people to markets or gatherings, and the narrow streets grow still beneath the quiet night sky. We have watched first glances, careful conversations, shared walks, family observation, and years of companionship slowly unfold. And through it all, The strange advice of that distant world has revealed its true purpose. Medieval people did not expect love to be easy. Their lives were uncertain, harvests could fail, winters could be harsh, illness could appear suddenly, and so they believed relationships needed strong foundations to survive such a world. Attraction alone was never considered enough. Instead, they built affection slowly through behavior repeated day after day. The patience they encouraged during first meetings taught restraint. The modest speech they practiced taught respect. The shared tasks taught cooperation. The quiet evenings taught comfort. Every custom, even the unusual ones, prepared two people to depend on one another calmly. What seems unusual to us now was simply their way of protecting peace. They feared haste more than distance, pride more than silence, and anger more than disagreement. By slowing courtship and guiding behavior, they tried to prevent regret before it appeared. Love was not meant to overwhelm life, it was meant to steady it. And perhaps this explains why so much of their advice feels quiet rather than dramatic. They were not teaching people how to impress someone for a moment. They were teaching how to live beside someone for years. The goal was not excitement that faded quickly, but companionship that remained even when daily life became ordinary. As the final candlelight softens inside the homes of our imagined town, two figures sit beside a fading hearth. No speeches are spoken. No promises need repeating. Their presence together is enough. The strange rules, the patience, and the rituals have led to this. A peaceful household where trust has replaced uncertainty. So we leave this medieval world gently now. Its rooftops resting beneath the stars and its streets silent until morning. The distant age reminds us that love once moved at the pace of seasons, growing quietly rather than instantly, built through attention and care rather than speed. If you found calm in this slow journey through history, you may softly like and subscribe so more peaceful stories can continue to accompany your nights. Rest comfortably. Let your thoughts drift, and allow the quiet of this old town to fade with you into sleep beneath the same calm sky that watched over those lives so many centuries ago.